We begin this morning with a crisis in Afghanistan. The government has all but fallen, and Taliban fighters have taken over the capital, Kabul, and the presidential palace. The group says it is there to stop looting as it pushes for transition of power. Fighters are reportedly inside the presidential palace. Afghan President Ashraf Ghani has left the country. Top official Abdullah was also among those confirming the news, referring to him as the former president.
The former president of Afghanistan, Ashraf Ghani, left the country and left it in a hard situation. God hold him to account, and the Afghan people will have their judgment on him. In the current situation, all I want from you is that God bless you to keep calm. I call on the defence and security forces to cooperate in providing security. I call on the Taliban forces not to enter Kabul and give a chance to talks. God help that the situation does not change unintentionally and there will be no loss of life and property.
Thousands of Afghans have sought refuge in Kabul in recent weeks. There were scenes of panic in the city today as people tried to flee. Western countries have been scrambling to evacuate their citizens. The U.S. sent in military helicopters to transport staff from the heavily fortified embassy compound in Kabul to the airport. The U.S. embassy later said there were reports of gunfire at Kabul airport. It warned that U.S. citizens in the area to take shelter as the security situation is changing quickly. It is almost 20 years since the Islamist group was ousted by the U.S.-led military coalition. They have seized the territory across the country at a speed now that the foreign troops have all but withdrawn. Notwithstanding, Afghanistan's interior minister delivered a statement assuring the people of Kabul that the city will remain safe.
People should not be worried. The city is secure and anyone who causes disorder in the city will face serious confrontation. The security of the city is guaranteed and it will not be attacked. The agreement for the big city of Kabul is that the power will be transferred peacefully to an interim administration. Until the time an agreement is reached on Kabul and Afghanistan, I assure you all that Kabul is secure. Your sons, your security forces and others are ready for defending Kabul.
And before the president fled the country, Ashraf Ghani gave this TV address a few hours ago.
There is a clear need that the National Directorate of Security, alongside the police and the Afghan army, take the responsibility of the security of all the citizens as per my order to the Defence Minister and the Interior Minister. It is our responsibility, and God willing, we will carry out the responsibility in its best manner.
Meanwhile, President Muhammadu Buhari has said in an article that he penned in the Financial Times of London that the United States pullout from Afghanistan and the subsequent fall of Kabul to the Taliban, that Africa has automatically become the new frontier of terror and global militancy. His op-ed in the Financial Times yesterday, there was a very confident air to his op-ed that, if Africa becomes a new frontier to terrorism, we'll fight them. We'll destroy them. Rail for rail, track for track, corner for corner.
Well, we had better, and we had better hope that confidence is well placed. But absolutely, it is an order for President Buhari to have written that op-ed, because I'm sure a chill went through all of us collectively when we saw those images of the Taliban in the presidential palace. And it's one of those John Donne moments. Do not send to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. I started to think about Nigeria. This is horrible, devastating news across the globe. And it just goes to show how easily the Taliban were sort of ejected. And look at how even easier it was. It was basically as if Joe Biden effected a handover to the Taliban. That is how easy it all was. And there's so many issues that you've raised here, which we'll be discussing later on in the show. But what is interesting to me now is that this disaster has happened, and that time-honored or dishonored political practice of buck shifting. Everybody is apportioning blame to everybody but themselves. I'm sure you saw Anthony Blinken talking about how it was the Trump era, the Trump government who started the peace negotiations, which is a fact. But the buck stops with President Joe Biden. We all sympathize with America in their longest war, 20-year war that cost them trillions and cost thousands of lives lost. But was this the way to withdraw? So, in such a haphazard, kind of embarrassing fashion, quite frankly. And President Trump has come to crow about how this is a legendary failure and America's worst defeat. From the images that we have seen, can we really argue with him at this point? And Joe Biden, I'm sure he imagined a completely different scenario. I'm sure he imagined some kind of triumphant speech on the 20th anniversary of September 11, but this is shaping up to be a disaster for him. In the UK, British MPs have been recalled from their, sun-soaked holidays, wherever they've gone, to come back and debate this in Parliament. But President Biden is still in Camp David. I think he's trying to signal, like what you were saying about President Buhari, confidence. But the rest of us simply are not feeling it.
Anyway, I'm told we'll take a short break, and after the break, we'll continue with the conversation. It's still the morning show. We'll be right back, and when we return, we'll talk more about the situation in Afghanistan. Welcome back to the morning show here on the Arise News channel. Just before we went on break, we were developing the crisis, the chaos in Afghanistan. And I think the appropriate phrase is chaos. And, it amounts to the humiliation of the United States, in my view. And this disaster was long in coming. It's a failure of the United States that we have seen in full display. In 1999, the United Nations Security Council had imposed sanctions on the Taliban and Afghan forces through Resolution 1267. And the whole idea then was to discourage the Taliban, from developing into a major terrorist organization. But the United States, as you have seen, after spending billions of dollars to provide training for Afghan forces, and after, Operation Enduring Freedom, that was also introduced by the U.S. and its allies, what we have seen is the collapse of all of that. And there are lessons to be learned. Yes, it's good that in the last 24 hours, Anthony Blinken has come round to admit that what has happened is similar to the fall of Saigon in Vietnam in 1975. Although in that case, communist forces were involved. In this particular case, you are dealing with fundamentalists, extremists, and the key difference, of course, is that whereas, that was about communism, this is, about religious extremism. So ideologically, the circumstances are different. But in terms of the failure of the United States, you are faced with the same situation. And a number of questions should be raised. One, what happened to all the training that the United States claims that it provided for the Afghanistan forces? What happened to the confidence that was expressed in July by President Biden that the day will never come whereby the Taliban will take over Afghanistan? But they've taken over. They've taken control. They've seized control. Now, again, what happened to the intra-Afghan deal that was struck in Qatar, which was one of the agreements that the United States entered into when the decision was taken to pull out the troops? Again, that has failed. Now, the rhetoric that is coming from the United States now is that, well, there is no way the United States can stay permanently in Afghanistan, and the people of Afghanistan would have to take charge of their own destiny. And that, I think, is the big lesson there for other countries of the world who look up to the United States. We have seen it in Libya. We have seen it in Syria. We have now seen it also in Afghanistan. So it looks like America, the average American, is more concerned in the long run about his own affairs in his own country. And so other countries who are looking up to the United States as a protector of the world had better taken their lesson from this. What will follow? I think, yes, the chaos has already started. The Taliban, the spokesperson and the head of the Islamic State, the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, as they say the country will now be known. First, they promised that they will not storm Kabul. They did. Second, they've told us that women will still have their freedoms. Well, nobody should believe them. Now, three, it is very clear that Afghanistan is going to become another major outpost for terrorism and extremism, and that will pose a major threat to the West and to the international community. And that explains the confusion that we have been seeing from Britain to the United States and even all the way to the United Nations. And I think it's also the reason why countries like Nigeria have to worry. Now, I've had some people say, oh, with Afghanistan now in the hands of the extremists, then, of course, countries like Nigeria that have ISWAP and Boko Haram will have to worry because there could be support coming from that direction. Well, what President Buhari in the article referred to may have tried to do yesterday is to express confidence that it won't happen. I've also read some analysis about some people saying, well, Nigeria is not Afghanistan. Afghanistan is almost homogeneous ideologically. It's a Muslim-dominated country. Nigeria is very diverse, but I don't think that the argument about diversity is a very strong one. You know, what the Taliban has done is likely to give confidence, you know, to other extremist forces in other parts of the world. I've had the view also expressed that it can't happen here because the Nigerian army is very strong. Well, those pushing that argument, I don't know how strong the Nigerian army is, but it's not part of our culture to criticize the military, to criticize people who have elected to give up their lives so that the rest of us can be safe. But there are critical lessons that countries like Nigeria can learn in terms of, you know, U.S. diplomacy within the international space, and also in terms of the threat of extremism and what could happen if you are over-dependent on outside support. That, I think, are some of the issues. But let's see what happens, you know, but I don't think anybody should invest any trust in the Taliban who have taken over in Afghanistan. And the U.S. has to do soul searching, has to reflect, because once it decided to pull out, it left the Afghans to their own devices. And now we have this terrible situation promoted by the United States. Will it affect the fortunes of the Biden administration? Maybe, because this is a major foreign policy disaster for the Joe Biden administration in its early moments. And I'm not surprised that former President Donald Trump is already telling President Joe Biden that on the basis of this, you know, President Biden should resign. Of course, that's Trumpism, you know, one-upmanship that is typical with Donald Trump.
I mean, so I have a lot to say about it. I just hope time will permit me. Number one, America caused this problem. So let's not even feel sorry for Americans. They were the ones that empowered the Mujahideens. When the Mujahideens broke apart in '94, they became the Taliban. Mullah Omar started the Taliban out of the infighting of the Mujahideens that were empowered by the Americans. That's why they fight the Russians. That's why the Talibans are students, you know, students of various sects that came out under Mullah Omar. They started this problem in the first place. They came back, had an agreement to push the Taliban out because they wanted a sort of like pseudo-democracy, put in another tribal warlord, Hamid Karzai, as president. Afterwards, put in another one of their own. A lot of people fail to realize that this same Ashraf Ghani running away held an American passport up till 2009.
Yes, he renounced his citizenship.
Yeah, in 2009. Yeah. They put in Ashraf Ghani there. The elections were disputed. Abdullah was said to have won the election, but they put in Ashraf Ghani there. Yeah. So they continued this. When they started the negotiation for peace, they were talking to the Taliban. They never talked to the Afghan government.
They didn't even have them in the room.
Yeah, they forced the Afghan government to release over 5,000 Taliban fighters. And they were the ones that went back posturing and saying, no, the Afghan army is strong. We have 50,000 troops. The Taliban has just 75,000 fighters. Nothing will happen. So for those that talk about strength of the army, it's not by strength of the army. The Afghan army outnumbers the Taliban fighters like 3 or 4 to 1. But you can see momentum is what is needed in war. And you see, it goes back to the advice of Harold Wilson. Harold Wilson will always say, number one foreign policy lesson, never invade Afghanistan. Because it's a hot mess.
Nobody has ever succeeded.
Yeah, nobody has succeeded. It's a hot mess. Don't touch Afghanistan. You know, it's a hot mess. But we need to go there because of time. We need to run.
I love that historical perspective.
Thank you so much.
Biden too did not learn from history. When he was vice president of the United States, they pulled out of Iraq, and that's how ISIS grew.
Yeah. That's it.
Well, the Afghans never really trusted the Americans anyway.
Oh, yeah.
So it's delusionary, you know, for the Americans to think that they can export democracy or Western culture to Afghanistan. But they managed to enrich Ghani, Ashraf Ghani, who we now hear is in Tajikistan or anywhere else.
No, he'll cross.
Where he can go and enjoy his wealth.
He was a John Hopkins trained professor, anthropology, so he will go back to lecturing in America soon. Good for him, Dr. Vati. We need to move on.
Okay, it's time now for a short break.
Welcome back. Now, our dependable Rota Sajiri is here to give us an African business update. Over to you, Rotas. Long time no see.
Hey, welcome back, Tundu. Good to have you back. Welcome back. Good morning to you. Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning to all our viewers. We kick off with the former Central Bank Governor Lamido Sanusi, also former Emir of Kano. He was at an online forum that was organized by the Harvard Kennedy School Alumni Association of Nigeria, and he was talking about how the last 35 years of economic growth, if you wish, has been erased in Nigeria by the last 5 years. And the metric that he used is GDP per capita GDP, where you basically measure economic outputs in an economy per person. So essentially, Nigeria being a $485 billion economy, you divide that by the population of 200 million, and then you get GDP per capita. So it's output per person. So we've got a couple charts here that I think he got his data from the World Bank. Now, when he referenced 1980, but he was referring to 1981. If you look at 1981, per capita GDP in Nigeria was $2,180 per person. He then mentioned that, well, in 2014, it jumped by almost 50% to $3,098 per person. Then you can see it start to fall. 2015 when oil prices went down, 2016 when we had our recession, 2,600 per person, 2016, 2,176. It goes down further in 2017 to 1,900. Then it starts to climb back up. But basically, he then says, look, by 2020, the average Nigerian would be worse off than they were in 1981. And so if you look at that, per the World Bank, per capita GDP in 2020 is $2,097 compared to where it was in 1981 at 2,180. You can put Nigeria up against a number of other select African countries. If we take a look at per capita GDP for just some other African nations, and you'll see, so we've got Mauritius over to the left at 8,622, Cote d'Ivoire, 5,458, South Africa, $5,090, Egypt, 3,547, Ghana, 2,320, and then Nigeria all the way at, 2,097. Now, of course, you got to put this into context. Mauritius has what, 1.2, 1.3 million people. I think there are more people in Lekki than there are in Mauritius. But then you're dividing the economy, the GDP by the population. But still, it is what it is. Per 2020, each of these economies in Africa, on average, have a higher GDP per capita than Nigeria. So he also said a lot. I mean, he also had his colloquium for his 60th birthday. He also mentioned the fact that he's not happy to be celebrating his 60th birthday because 60 years ago when he was born, analysts in the United States were saying that Nigeria was a brighter economic prospect than Japan. And he says, where is Japan today and where is Nigeria today? You talked about subsidies, you talked about leadership, you talked about the fact that religion shouldn't be what Nigerians use to measure the country. It should be in terms of GDP. So that's from the former Emir of Kano. Move to Abuja. Here's a quick rant from a business owner who says that the Abuja Municipal Area Council, the AMAC, is charging her, give her a 50,000 Naira levy to use her generator. Let's take a listen.
I came to my shop today again and brought this for generator. They said I should pay 50,000 Naira for using gen. That I have a gen, I'm supposed to pay 50,000 Naira. And I'm asking to which account, because there's no account, there's no government account on this paper like this they gave me. They said I should pay 50,000 Naira. Every day, these people are bringing one bill or the other. One bill or the other. I have their papers plenty. They are bringing one bill or the other. Why are they frustrating business owners like us? How much is the generator that I'm paying 50,000 Naira for? How much did I buy the generator that to pay you guys 50,000 Naira?
Yeah, so essentially this is pretty much the AMAC Environmental Services Department's gaseous emissions department, a gaseous emissions permit. It's almost like a carbon emissions levy, if you will. But of course, as we know, everybody uses generators in this country, and you know, it looks like they target smaller entrepreneurs than bigger ones. And then finally, to Zambia, Mr. Hakainde Hichilema has won the presidential election there. This is what he's facing. In Zambia, he's facing high inflation of 24.6%, which is the highest in almost 2 decades in Zambia. He's also facing high gross government debt to GDP. So he's got a lot of work cut out for him. That is Mr. Hakainde Hichilema. And that's our African business update.
Well, looking at a silver lining or copper lining, copper is doing brisk business now with, you know, the rise of electric cars and what have you. And Zambia is Africa's second largest copper producer. So fingers crossed for him. Nobody wants to inherit this kind of a disaster.
Well, let me talk about, the former governor of the central bank, Alhaji Sanusi Lamido. The tendency in Nigeria is to take up people when they're saying the truth. And I hope that nobody in the corridors of government will turn around and say, Alhaji Sanusi Lamido doesn't know what he's talking about. The important thing about what he has said is that it's based on facts. It says GDP per capita with regard to purchasing power parity. Purchasing power parity is the amount of disposable income that you have in your pocket. And it said GDP per capita in 1980, as you pointed out, was about $2,180. As of 2014, it improved. It increased by about $1,000 to over $3,000. But by 2019, we had gone down to about 2,000, maybe 179. And his fear, his concern, is that the country is not working. And that the way we are carrying on, in another 2, 3, 4 years, the situation could be worse. Now, you don't need to meet a soothsayer to see that he's telling the simple truth. And his main argument is that, look, the challenges we face in Nigeria, 70% of it is related to how we have mismanaged the Nigerian economy. Okay, a bag of rice is even more than the minimum wage. At the time, a bag of rice was about 30,000. Are we going to start eating raw rice? You have not added the cost of tomato. You have not added the palm oil or groundnut oil that you use to prepare a delicious plate of jollof rice. So this is the challenge that people face. People are suffering. There is poverty in the land. So rather than anybody coming around and saying, oh, it's too critical of government, no. That would not be the way to go. Is to look at the ideas that he has profiled. And of course, congratulations to him on his success. As for Zambia, I think Hakainde Hichilema has his job cut out for him. The commodity prices are collapsing in Zambia. There is poverty in the country. It's even facing another round of depression, if not recession. COVID-19 has turned the economy more or less upside down. He's lucky. This is his 6th time that he's been running for that election. He lost to Edgar Lungu in 2016 by just 100,000 votes. But if you look at the vote, the way it has gone, it's a vote of no confidence in Edgar Lungu, who says he has provided infrastructure, he has provided roads, but he was violating people's rights. He is now claiming that the election was not free and fair, an election that was conducted by him, an election in which he pulled out the army and was intimidating the opposition. Congratulations to the people of Zambia. What we have seen in demonstration is the power of the people. The people have spoken in unison. And one factor in that election is youth. The youth, they mobilize, in large numbers to give, Hakainde 2.8 million votes compared to the 1.8 million that Edgar Lungu was able to get. And it was a coalition. Yeah. The UPND, a coalition of about 10 political parties, which means that when the people are ready to remove a leader who is not performing, they will come together and they will make a statement.
I mean, I just hope we don't come here and talk about how stupid Hichilema has become over the years, because that's always the case with Africa. If you see how we all celebrated when Yaya Jammeh was pulled out of Gambia, the case has not changed with Adama Barrow now. So that's my problem with Africa. And for a man that shut down the internet and missed the election to say the elections were not fair, we know who truly was not fair. You see, concerning Nigeria and what the former CBN governor did say, what has just happened, Ruth, is that we have just jogged at a particular spot for 40 years. Isn't it amazing? From 1981 to 2021, we've just been jogging at one spot as regards GDP. it speaks volumes of our economic management. Volumes.
It does.
So,
it really does.
Thank you so much, Rotus. And Sam, we'll go on to Michael now. Or we'll take a breather.
Yeah. Hello there. Yeah. So global overview. I'm not going to touch on anything to do with Afghanistan because you're obviously doing that in your general news coverage. So just sticking with business basically. And there's little evidence that the regional Delta variant is having an enormous effect in the Asia region this morning. I'll come onto the markets there. Even though there was a slight hit from consumer confidence in the United States on Friday, but nothing much. So China data then basically disappointed. Retail sales up 8.5%, supposed to be up 11.5%, and industrial production there falling a little short as well. In Japan, the Nikkei dropped 1.79 in afternoon trade, but the Japan economy rebounding actually, up 1.3% after a revised 3.7% slump in the first quarter. Where will it go? Possibly we won't know much until the end of the year, but it's going in a positive fashion. It's still, believe it or not, the world's third largest economy. Story, isn't it? Right, games consoles were once banned in China, as were games as well. Now Chinese developers want a slice of that. The pie's worth $49 billion if they get hold of a little bit of it. Chinese developers who do the software, like Tencent and NetEase, they make the titles for the consoles. Now things are changing, and the whole country is looking towards a policy of making the consoles and the hardware itself. By contrast, here's the thing. You remember me telling you about the US chip giant taking over a company in Wales? Well, it turns out that the Chinese influence in that company, it's eventually owned by the Chinese, has actually stopped them supplying chips to the US startup. So they're very worried about that. They're wondering about where they're going to get supply from. That decision, of course, being looked at by, or rather the decision to buy this company, being looked at by the business secretary and the prime minister as we speak. Global investors are pivoting. They're not sure about where China is actually going with its clampdown at the moment. Regulatory attack on tech platforms. We've talked about that in the past. Now they're looking at semiconductors, education, fintech, and so on, up 400% in the second quarter. That's the way investors are looking at China as we speak. Just a little bit about Afghanistan, and global airlines are working out how they can avoid flying over the airspace there, particularly United Airlines and the rest. I suspect others will too, particularly on flights to India and so on. Now, here's a story of the Times. BHP Billiton, the world's biggest miner, it's in talks with a company in Australia, in Perth, trying to divest itself of oil and gas. Its slice of oil and gas is worth about $13 billion, so it's in talks with Woodside as we speak. So as far as the United States is concerned, a bit of a recap. New records on Friday. We'll wait to see what happens today. That's really all I wish to say about the United States. Got a big week coming up, which I'll touch on in a second. Gatwick Airport in the UK talking to its lenders, unsurprisingly suffering from a fall in air traffic and so on. UK recruitment actually soaring as people are looking for people to service the service industries. They're not getting those at the moment because a lot of people are away on furlough. Commodities very, very quickly. Gold prices took advantage of a weaker dollar, and oil, basically anything linked to growth stocks, not doing that well at the moment for all the usual reasons. So the week ahead, we got Fed minutes coming up, which will be very important. We'll get some idea of what they're actually thinking there and when interest rates and all the rest of it. I don't suspect any detailed thing, but we get to get a flavour of what the Fed's thinking, and US retail sales for obvious reasons as well. What is the US consumer doing? Is he or she out shopping, or are they staying at home? These are very important questions. They will be answered, or to a certain, they'll be addressed perhaps that's the best way to put it, during the week, and it will have an effect on the markets, which I will have pleasure in bringing to you. That's the global view this morning.
Thank you very much, Michael. Unfortunately, we don't have much time. I would have loved you to talk about geopolitical risks to markets as a result of the Afghanistan crisis. But thank you. Maybe tomorrow we'll focus on that.